Ethan had just finished a long, tiring day at work. The only thing he wanted now was a warm shower to relax his sore muscles and clear his mind. He stepped into the bathroom, turning on the hot water, the steam quickly filling the small space. It was the kind of moment he lived for after a hard day. Just the quiet, the warmth, and the solitude. As the water cascaded over his skin, Ethan closed his eyes, letting the pressure of the day melt away. But then, something strange happened. The air around him shifted. There was a faint humming sound, almost like a distant engine, but it didn't belong. Before he could even think to react, a flash of light blinked in front of him, and the next thing he knew, a woman stood in the shower with him. For a moment, Ethan thought he had imagined it. Maybe it was the steam, or maybe his mind was just playing tricks on him. But when he opened his eyes again, she was still there, standing right in front of him. His breath caught in his throat as he stared at the stranger. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her skin was a deep shade of violet, glowing faintly in the steam, and her eyes were silver, like mirrors reflecting a world he couldn't understand. She looked both strong and graceful, as if she didn't belong to Earth at all. Ethan stepped back, his heart racing. What are you?" His voice cracked slightly, the words barely making it past his lips. He didn't know what to do. Was this some kind of prank? Or was he dreaming? The woman tilted her head, studying him as though he were some kind of puzzle to solve. "I am Lyra," she said, her voice smooth and calm, though there was a strange undertone to it. "I've come to observe." She didn't seem shocked or embarrassed by her sudden appearance. Instead, she seemed curious, like she had expected this moment to happen, but she didn't know what to do next. "Observe?" Ethan repeated, still trying to make sense of what was happening. "Who are you exactly? How did you get here?" Lyra glanced at the shower's water, almost as if she hadn't noticed the awkwardness of the situation. "I teleported," she explained simply, as though it were the most normal thing in the world. "It's a transport technique. It's malfunctioning, I suppose. I'm not entirely sure how I ended up in your shower, but this seems like a suitable place." Ethan blinked, his mind struggling to catch up. He could barely grasp what she was saying. A teleportation malfunction? He took another step back, looking for an escape, but there was nowhere to go. His brain refused to process the situation. Maybe this was a hallucination. Maybe he had fallen asleep in the shower. Lyra's eyes focused on him more intently. She didn't seem concerned about her appearance in his bathroom or the awkwardness of the situation. Her gaze was thoughtful, almost calculating. "Humans," she mused. "You're fascinating. Your physicality, your emotions, your thoughts, they're so complex." Ethan didn't know whether to laugh or scream. This was absurd. "You're not human," he said, almost as a statement of fact. Lyra smiled slightly, though it wasn't the smile of someone trying to make a joke. "No, I am not human. I am from a planet far from here. My kind values knowledge, strength, and understanding. And now I find myself here, in your shower." The bizarre conversation kept going, Lyra speaking as if this were an everyday occurrence for her. Meanwhile, Ethan stood frozen, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was hearing. This was real. He could feel the warmth of the water and the cold draft that had started coming from the now open bathroom door. This was really happening. "I didn't mean to intrude," Lyra continued, her voice softer now, almost apologetic. "I just needed time to recalibrate. My ship, well, it's not functioning at its best right now." She looked at him, her silver eyes piercing through him like she could read his every thought. "I will leave once I have fixed it, but I would like to observe. Stay with you if that's all right." Ethan took a deep breath. His mind raced as he tried to figure out how to respond. Was this some sort of trick? Was he being scammed? But as he looked at her, her strange beauty, her calm confidence, he realized this wasn't a normal situation. She was serious. The weight of the moment settled in, and for some reason, he didn't feel afraid. He should have been terrified, but he wasn't. Maybe it was the strange sense of curiosity that mirrored her own. Or maybe it was the look of vulnerability hidden behind her powerful exterior. Lyra wasn't like anything he had ever seen, and despite the shock, a part of him felt oddly connected to her. "Okay," Ethan said slowly, still unsure of what he had just agreed to. "You can stay, but, could you please give me some space to finish my shower?" Lyra nodded, stepping back with surprising grace as if she had been waiting for him to say something like that. "Of course. I will wait outside." Ethan watched her leave, his heart still pounding. What had just happened? A part of him was still sure this was some kind of elaborate prank, but deep down he knew that it wasn't. This was real, and somehow his life was about to change forever. Ethan stepped out of the shower, his body still warm from the steam and the strange events that had just unfolded. He grabbed a towel, wiping his face, trying to shake off the confusion that had settled in. The bathroom was quiet again, and for a brief moment he wondered if everything had been a dream, but the reality of Lyra's presence in his home didn't let him forget what had happened. He walked into the living room, still holding the towel around his waist. Lyra was standing by the window, gazing out at the city. The light from outside cast soft shadows across her violet skin, making her look even more otherworldly. Her silver eyes were fixed on the skyline, but she seemed aware of his presence, as if she could feel his every movement. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, his voice hesitant. He wasn't sure what to say or how to act around her. Part of him still wanted to pinch himself and check if he was dreaming, but there was something so real about Lyra, so undeniable, that he couldn't escape it. She turned slowly, meeting his gaze. "I am fine. Thank you for allowing me to stay." Her voice was calm, yet there was an edge to it, like she was constantly observing everything around her. "I am just trying to understand your world. It is fascinating, yet so different from mine." Ethan nodded, still processing. "I get that. But you said you came to observe. What exactly are you observing? And why me?" He couldn't help but ask. It didn't make sense to him that she had just ended up in his shower for no reason. Lyra took a step closer, her movements smooth and deliberate. "I observe humans because I wish to understand them. Your species is unique. Your emotions, your ways of thinking, your behaviors, they are all so different from what I know. I've traveled far and seen many civilizations, but nothing like this." She paused, her silver eyes narrowing slightly. "You, Ethan, are more interesting than you realize." Ethan felt a strange shiver at her words. "Interesting? Why?" She tilted, her head as if considering the question carefully. "You are calm. Most humans are quick to panic or judge. But you remain composed. Even now, after everything that has happened, you have not screamed or run away. You don't seem afraid. Why is that?" He frowned, a little confused. "I don't know. I guess I'm just trying to make sense of it all. You're here, you're not hurting me, and you're not asking for anything crazy. So I'm just trying to deal with it the best way I can." Lyra smiled slightly as though she understood something that Ethan didn't. "You are very different from the others I have encountered. Many would try to control or contain me, fearing my power. You do not fear me." Her voice softened. "That is unusual." Ethan couldn't help but feel a little flattered, though he still felt uneasy with everything. "I don't know if I'd call it bravery," he said with a weak laugh. "It's just, I don't know. You don't seem dangerous. At least not to me." Lyra's eyes twinkled. "Danger is not always seen, Ethan. But I do not wish to harm you. I simply want to understand." Ethan sat down on the couch, rubbing his temples. His brain was on overload. Everything was happening too fast, and he still had so many questions. "So, if you're not here to hurt me, what exactly do you want from me?" he asked, his voice steady but curious. "I want to know your world, your thoughts, your way of life." Lyra replied. You will help me learn. You will show me your ways. Ethan felt a strange sense of responsibility. It wasn't just that he had been thrown into an alien encounter. It was that Lyra seemed to rely on him in some way. She was clearly powerful, clearly intelligent, yet she was seeking him out, asking for his help. The weight of it made him pause for a moment. But why me? He asked again, still not fully understanding. Lyra stepped closer to him, her presence somehow both calming and overwhelming. You are not like the others, she said quietly. You are patient, open to new ideas. That is why I chose you. Ethan was silent for a moment, taking in her words. There was something about her that drew him in, something almost magnetic. The way she spoke, the way she moved, it all made her seem otherworldly, yet at the same time, there was a quiet vulnerability to her that made Ethan feel protective, even though she was the one who had traveled across the stars. I don't know what this means, he admitted. But if you really want to stay, then I guess I can show you around, help you with whatever you need. But you have to promise me something. Lyra raised an eyebrow. What is it that you wish for? You have to tell me what you know about teleportation, Ethan said, a half-smile creeping onto his face. Because, honestly, I'm still trying to figure out how you ended up in my shower. If you can teleport like that, then I need to know how it works. Lyra smiled, a glint of amusement in her silver eyes. I can teach you, but be warned, it is not as simple as you might think. It is not just technology, it is an understanding of space itself. Ethan nodded, feeling a little better. At least now he had something concrete to focus on. As crazy as it sounded, he was actually looking forward to learning about her world, her alien world. Maybe, just maybe, this wouldn't be the weirdest thing that had ever happened to him. The days following Lyra's arrival felt like a blur to Ethan. At first, he had expected the situation to settle into something more familiar, but instead, it only grew more strange. Lyra, though alien, had a way of making his apartment feel like a new kind of normal. She wasn't exactly intrusive, but her presence changed everything. She watched him with an intensity that he couldn't ignore, observing everything he did with the same curiosity she had shown when she first appeared in his shower. Ethan had tried to go about his daily routine, but it wasn't easy with Lyra, constantly asking questions about things he had always taken for granted. She wanted to know everything about human life, from the most mundane to the most complex. She asked about food, what it tasted like, why people needed to eat, and what kind of flavors humans preferred. She wanted to know about emotions, how humans dealt with happiness, sadness, or anger. She asked about friendships, love, and why humans needed to sleep. It was like living with a curious child, but one whose knowledge and insight came from a distant, advanced world. One evening, after Ethan returned home from work, he found Lyra sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine he had left on the coffee table. The images inside didn't seem to interest her much, but she kept looking at them, her silver eyes scanning each page as if trying to understand what they meant. Ethan took a seat beside her, feeling a little guilty that he hadn't been more mindful of her curiosity. Do you like it here? Ethan asked, trying to break the silence. Lyra turned her head, meeting his gaze. Her expression was soft, but there was something deeper beneath her calm demeanor. I do. There is much to learn here. Your world, it is so full of contradictions. I have yet to understand why humans live the way they do. Ethan raised an eyebrow. What do you mean by that? Lyra put the magazine down and looked at him, her gaze piercing but thoughtful. Your species seems to value progress, and yet is so focused on the past. You try to make advancements in technology, but you still cling to traditions and emotions that do not serve you. Why? Ethan wasn't sure how to answer. He had never really thought about it that way. I guess we just try to make sense of things, he said slowly. Life is messy, you know. We do the best we can with what we have, and sometimes that means holding on to things that feel important, even if they don't always make sense. It's like tradition is a way of Remembering who we are? Lyra seemed to consider his words carefully, her silver eyes gleaming with thought. I understand, she said at last. I have seen much in my travels, but this human struggle to find meaning in chaos is different. It is intriguing. Ethan felt a sense of pride at her words, even though he wasn't sure he fully understood them. We're not all that special, he said, shrugging. We just try to make it through each day. Lyra studied him for a moment longer before changing the subject. Tell me about love. You humans seem to believe in it. Why? Ethan wasn't prepared for that question. He shifted uncomfortably, unsure of how to explain something so complicated. Love? He scratched the back of his head. It's hard to describe. It's not just about attraction or affection, it's a connection, I guess. Something deep, something that makes you care about someone more than you care about yourself sometimes. It's about trust and support. And he trailed off, feeling a little embarrassed. I don't know. It's one of those things that you can't really explain until you feel it. Lyra listened carefully, her eyes fixed on him. I have read about it, she said softly. But I do not understand how something so unpredictable, so irrational, can hold such power over you. Ethan thought about that for a moment. I guess that's the thing about love. It's not meant to be understood. It just is. You can try to explain it, but sometimes it's better just to feel it, without needing to know everything. Lyra didn't respond right away. She seemed to be mulling over his words, processing them in her own way. Then she turned back to him, her expression unreadable. You are a mystery, Ethan, and that is why I find you so fascinating. Ethan smiled slightly, though he still felt a little uncomfortable under her gaze. I'm just a guy who works a 9-to-5 job. There's not much mystery about me. Lyra shook her head, her silver eyes glowing softly in the dim light. You don't understand. Your simplicity is what makes you complex. You see the world as it is, and yet you try to find meaning in it. Most of my people do not do that. We value knowledge above all, but we do not seek to understand the emotions that drive behavior. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. He was starting to understand that Lyra wasn't just an alien from another planet. She was someone who truly saw the world in a completely different way. Her understanding of everything around her, even the simplest things, was far beyond anything he could grasp. Do you ever get tired of being, different? He asked suddenly, his voice almost a whisper. Lyra looked at him, her expression softening. I do not tire of it, Ethan. It is what I am. But I sometimes wonder what it would be like to be like you, to live in a world that is not driven by logic and knowledge, but by something else, something more human. There was a long pause, and for the first time since she had arrived, Ethan felt as though Lyra wasn't just an alien in his home. She was someone who in her own way might be as lonely as he was. He didn't know what it meant for her to say that, but something in her voice made him want to reach out to her. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to help each other understand the worlds they came from. As the evening wore on, the two of them sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. For Ethan, it felt as though his life had been turned upside down. He had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was certain: things would never be the same again. The next few days passed by with a strange sense of routine, but one that was far from ordinary. Lyra continued to stay with Ethan, and while he had begun to adjust to her presence, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had been turned upside down. Each day she asked more questions, trying to understand human customs and behaviors. It was exhausting at times, but also fascinating to see her try to comprehend things that seemed so simple to him. One afternoon, after Ethan returned from work, he found Lyra sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a glass of water. She seemed deep in thought, her eyes scanning the clear liquid as though trying to understand its purpose. Everything okay? Ethan asked as he walked into the room, setting his bag down on the counter. Lyra glanced up at him, her expression unreadable. I've been thinking about your planet, your species. Wait, you live such short lives. Why do you bother with things that won't last? Ethan blinked in surprise at the question. What do you mean? Lyra gestured toward the water. Your time here is so brief, and yet you build so much. Your structures, your cities, your knowledge, it all fades with time. Why do you spend so much energy on things that eventually vanish? Ethan considered her words for a moment, his mind processing the depth of her question. I guess because we want to make a mark. Even if we're here for a short time, we want to leave something behind. We want to be remembered, even if it's just in the smallest way. Maybe it's about making the most of the time we have. Lyra was silent for a long moment, as if she were trying to understand what he meant. Finally, she spoke. That makes sense, but it also seems inefficient. Why not focus on things that last? Ethan smiled a little, his thoughts drifting to the things that mattered most to him. The relationships, the connections, the experiences that couldn't be measured in years or concrete achievements. Sometimes the things that matter most aren't the ones that last. It's the moments that count, the memories, the people you care about, the things you experience in the here and now. Lyra looked at him curiously, as though she were seeing him in a new light. Humans, you live for the now, not the future. It's both reckless and beautiful. Ethan shrugged. I suppose. We don't really have a choice. Time keeps moving forward whether we're ready for it or not. Her eyes softened a little, the silver gleam of curiosity in them dimming just slightly. I think I understand. Perhaps I've been too focused on the future and not enough on the present. Ethan chuckled softly. Yeah, I get the sense you think a lot about the future, but you're here now in the present. Maybe it's time to enjoy it a little. He paused, noticing how strange it was to be giving advice to an alien, of all people. You know, you've been staying with me for a while now. I guess I'm curious about you too. I want to know about your world, your people. Lyra raised an eyebrow at him. My world? You wish to know about my people? Her voice was almost cautious, as though she was unsure how much she should reveal. Ethan nodded. Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot. I mean, you're clearly not from here. You said you came to Earth to observe humans, but what's your world like? How do you live? What's it like for you? For a moment, Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she stood up from the table and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Ethan watched her, noticing the way her posture seemed almost distant. It was as if she were trying to find the right words. My people, she began slowly, are not like humans. We do not value things like love or friendship the way you do. We value strength, knowledge, and survival. We are warriors. We have mastered technology and space travel, and we are constantly striving to expand our understanding of the universe. Ethan listened quietly, sensing the weight of her words. There was a hardness to her voice when she spoke about her people, as though she had been shaped by that world. We are not like you, she continued. We do not seek emotional connections. We see them as weaknesses. We focus on what can be achieved, what can be conquered. There is no place for things like doubt or uncertainty. Emotions can cloud judgment, and so we suppress them. Ethan's heart sank a little at her words. It sounded like a cold, lifeless existence, a world where people were expected to be perfect, without flaws or weaknesses. That doesn't sound happy, he said softly. Lyra turned to face him, her silver eyes locking with his. Happiness is irrelevant. It is a fleeting thing. What matters is strength, survival, and knowledge. Those are the things that keep our species going. Ethan looked at her, sensing the quiet sorrow behind her words. Despite her strength and the way she carried herself, there was a sadness in her eyes, something deep within her that didn't align with the warrior mentality she described. It sounds lonely, he said quietly. I mean, you're telling me that you don't get to experience things like love or friendship. That must be hard, right? Lyra was silent for a long time. She seemed to be weighing his words carefully. Finally, she spoke again, her voice quieter now. Perhaps I've come to realize that. But it is not easy for my people to admit such things. We are not taught to care for others the way you do. It is something I never learned. But here, with you, I feel something different. I feel human in a way. Ethan didn't know how to respond to that. He could see that Lyra was struggling with emotions she wasn't supposed to feel. But somehow the vulnerability she showed made her seem more real, more relatable than any warrior or scientist could ever be. For the first time since she had arrived, Ethan felt a deep connection to her, not just as an alien but as someone who, in her own way, was as lost and searching for meaning as he was. The silence between them was comfortable now, filled with unspoken understanding. The days grew warmer, and with each passing moment Ethan found himself more and more immersed in the strange new life that had taken root in his apartment. Lyra's presence, though initially overwhelming, had become a constant in his life. The questions she asked, the way she observed him, and her quiet moments of reflection had begun to feel normal in a way. Yet as much as Ethan tried to settle into this new rhythm, a feeling lingered. A feeling that things between him and Lyra were shifting in a way neither of them fully understood. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, orange glow through the windows, Lyra stood in front of the mirror examining herself. Ethan had walked in from the kitchen, a plate of food in hand, but he stopped when he saw her. She was staring at her reflection, her silver eyes focused on the curves of her face, the violet hue of her skin, and the sharpness of her features. For a moment, she looked almost vulnerable, like someone unsure of their own identity. "Do you ever feel out of place?" Lyra asked, not turning to face him. Ethan hesitated, lowering the plate of food onto the counter. "Out of place? You mean like here, on Earth?" Lyra nodded, still gazing into the mirror. "I do not belong here. I have come to understand that. I am an outsider, an observer. I do not fit in with your world or your people." Ethan's heart tightened at her words. He had noticed the distance in her voice, the subtle way she pulled away whenever their conversations turned to deeper feelings or emotions. It was as though she feared becoming too involved, as though she believed she didn't have the right to. "You're not an outsider, Lyra," Ethan said softly, his voice gentle but firm. "You're here now. You're a part of my life, whether you feel like it or not." Lyra turned her head to look at him, her silver eyes searching his face as though trying to understand the sincerity in his words. She had always been so controlled, so composed, but in that moment Ethan could see the flicker of uncertainty in her gaze. "I have been trained my whole life to be strong, to be independent," she said quietly. "Emotions and connections are weaknesses, things to be avoided. But here, I feel different. You make me feel different." Ethan didn't know how to respond at first. He had known Lyra to be a warrior, someone who was always in control, always measured. To hear her admit that she felt something other than control, something more human, was unexpected. It made his heart race in a way he didn't fully understand. "You're allowed to feel," he said gently, stepping closer to her. "You don't have to hide it. Not here. Not with me." For a long moment, Lyra didn't say anything. She seemed to be processing his words, as though they were foreign to her. Finally, she broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not sure how to be human, Ethan. I don't know how to share these things, how to trust them. My people, we do not love the way humans do. We do not form connections with others. It is not what we were taught." Ethan reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder gently. "You don't have to change everything at once," he said. "You can take your time. We all have to figure things out in our own way." Lyra closed her eyes briefly, and Ethan could feel the tension in her body slowly begin to ease. She wasn't used to this, the openness, the acceptance of emotions that were foreign to her, but she was learning, little by little. "I've never allowed myself to be vulnerable," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "It feels strange, like I'm breaking all the rules I've lived by." Ethan smiled softly, the warmth in his heart growing as he spoke. Sometimes, breaking the rules is exactly what you need to do. You don't have to be perfect, Lyra. You don't have to be the strong, emotionless warrior all the time. She turned to face him then, her silver eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. And what if I do not know how to love? How to connect the way you do? Ethan's heart beat a little faster, the words he wanted to say gathering at the tip of his tongue. Maybe you don't need to know how to do it perfectly. Maybe we just learn together, one step at a time. Lyra regarded him carefully, the wall she had built around herself slowly beginning to crumble. You are kind, Ethan. I have never encountered someone like you before. I do not know what this is, what we are becoming, but it is something I am willing to understand. Ethan's smile widened, his chest swelling with an emotion he couldn't quite put into words. He had known from the beginning that Lyra was different, so far removed from anything he had ever known. But the more he learned about her, the more he realized that their differences were what made their connection so special. It's okay to not have all the answers, Ethan said, his voice filled with sincerity. We're figuring it out together. That's what matters. For a moment, Lyra remained silent, and Ethan thought she might pull away again, retreat back into her old ways. But then, without warning, she reached out and placed her hand over his. The gesture was small, but it held more meaning than any words could convey. It was a step forward, a step into the unknown. I will try, Lyra said softly, her silver eyes meeting his. For you, I will try to understand. Ethan felt a rush of warmth flood through him. He didn't know what the future held for them, or where their journey would take them. But for the first time since this strange encounter had begun, he felt like maybe, just maybe, they could both find something worth fighting for. The weeks continued to pass in a strange, quiet harmony. Ethan had gotten used to the presence of Lyra in his home, and in a way, he couldn't imagine life without her. At first, he had been unsure of how long she would stay, or if her sudden arrival was just some bizarre cosmic accident. But as time went on, it became clear that Lyra wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. She was here to learn, to observe, and, whether she admitted it or not, to form a bond with him. Ethan had slowly adjusted to her unending questions, the constant stream of curiosity that flowed from her. But there was something else now, something unspoken. Lyra had stopped asking so many questions about the world around them and had started asking more about Ethan himself. She was beginning to open up little by little, and Ethan could see it in her eyes. The way she looked at him now, not just as an observer, but as someone who might be more than just a subject of study. One afternoon, Lyra was sitting on the weir couch, her legs crossed, staring at her hands. Ethan watched her for a moment from the doorway of the kitchen. She hadn't noticed him yet, and he took the opportunity to study her. Her violet skin was darker than it had been when she first arrived, and her silver eyes now held a depth of emotion that wasn't there before. Are you all right? Ethan asked, stepping into the room. Lyra looked up, startled for a moment, but quickly regained her composure. I am fine, she said, though her voice was quieter than usual. Ethan could tell something was on her mind. Over the weeks, he had learned to read her subtle shifts in mood. Lyra was rarely transparent with her feelings, but he could see past the mask she wore. He stepped closer, sitting beside her on the couch. You're not fine, he said gently. What's going on? Lyra hesitated, glancing at him. She opened her mouth as though to speak, but closed it again. She wasn't used to sharing, and the vulnerability she was feeling now seemed to overwhelm her. I've been thinking, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. About what you said the other night. About breaking the rules. About feeling. It's not easy. My people, they have taught me that emotions are something to be controlled, something to suppress. But here, with you, I don't know. It feels like I am becoming something else. Ethan sat quietly, listening, understanding. He knew how hard it must be for her trying to break free from the rigidity of her upbringing. He had seen it in her eyes when she first arrived. Lyra had always been more than just a warrior, more than just an observer. She had a heart, even if she didn't know how to use it. "I get it," Ethan said softly. "I can't imagine what it must be like to feel so different from everyone around you. But you don't have to carry that alone, Lyra. I'm here, and whatever you're feeling, whatever you're going through, I'll help you through it." Lyra met his gaze then, her silver eyes searching his face as though weighing his words carefully. She was quiet for a long time before speaking again. "You are a strange human, Ethan," she said with a faint smile, though it was more serious than playful. "You have no fear, no hesitation. You simply accept." Ethan shrugged, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I don't really see the point in being scared. Life's hard enough without adding fear into the mix." Lyra's expression softened as she looked at him, her gaze growing more intense. She had never seen a human quite like Ethan. Someone so willing to embrace the unknown, to welcome something as foreign as her into his life without hesitation. It was both perplexing and comforting to her in ways she couldn't fully understand. "I don't know what to do with all of this," she admitted. "I don't know what I'm feeling or how to handle it. It's confusing. I want to understand, but part of me still wants to run away from it all." Ethan's smile faded a little as he watched her. "You don't have to figure it all out right now. Take your time. We're both figuring this out together. I don't know what comes next, but I know that we can handle it, whatever it is." There was a long silence between them. It was the first time Lyra had allowed herself to be so open, so vulnerable. And it was the first time Ethan had truly realized how much she was starting to trust him. He hadn't expected this, didn't know if he was ready for it, but now that it was happening, he felt a strange sense of purpose. They were both on this journey together, and there was no going back. Suddenly, a loud, sharp beeping noise filled the room, breaking the moment. Both of them turned toward the sound, and Ethan's stomach dropped when he saw the small device Lyra had been working on for the past few days, sitting on the table. The device, a small, cylindrical object that had been hidden beneath a cloth, was blinking red. Lyra quickly stood, moving to the table, her earlier uncertainty replaced with focus. She reached for the device, her fingers pressing a sequence of buttons in a hurried motion. "It's them," she muttered under her breath. "They've found me." Ethan stood up, his heart pounding. Who's found you?" Lyra didn't answer right away. Her expression was hard, her brow furrowed. For a moment, Ethan thought she might say something, but instead, she turned to him, her silver eyes filled with a mix of determination and regret. "My people. They've tracked my location. I've been trying to keep my technology hidden from them, but I don't have much time." She looked at him, her gaze softening for a moment. "Ethan, I need to leave. Now." Ethan's stomach sank, and for the first time since she had arrived, he realized just how much her presence had meant to him. He wasn't ready for her to leave. Not like this. "Wait, what do you mean? Can't you just—" "No," Lyra interrupted, her voice firm but pained. "This is something I must do. I cannot stay here anymore." Ethan felt a cold weight settle in his chest as he stared at Lyra. The moment she spoke, he knew it was serious. He didn't understand all the details of her situation. He never had. But this was different. The urgency in her voice, the way her body tensed as she worked to deactivate the device. It was clear that her world was about to collide with his in a way he wasn't prepared for. "What do you mean, leave?" Ethan asked, his voice shaking slightly. "You're not just going to disappear again, are you? You don't have to go." Lyra didn't look at him at first. Her attention was fully on the device, her fingers moving quickly to adjust settings, to make sure nothing gave away her location. But when she finally turned to face him, the softness in her eyes betrayed the sternness in her voice. "I have no choice," she said quietly. "My people, they do not understand what I've learned here, what I've felt. They will come for me, and I cannot risk putting you in danger. I've already stayed longer than I should have. The longer I stay, the harder it will be to leave." She paused, her voice catching for just a moment. "I never wanted to get close to anyone. I thought it would be easier if I didn't. But you made me feel things I can't ignore." Ethan stood frozen, his mind racing. Everything inside him told him to argue, to convince her to stay. But he knew that if Lyra was right about her people, staying any longer might endanger them both. His thoughts scattered, and for a moment all he could do was watch her. This alien who had become so much more than just a visitor. She had become part of his life, and the thought of losing her was like a sharp, sudden ache in his chest. "You don't have to go," Ethan repeated, his voice stronger this time. "We can figure this out. There has to be another way." Lyra shook her head, the movement sharp and final. "I've already tried every way I could think of. Staying here, trying to hide, none of it will work. My people are powerful, Ethan. They will track me down no matter where I go. If I stay here much longer, I put you in more danger than I'm willing to risk." Ethan's heart dropped. He didn't know how to fight against something so big, so out of their control. "But I don't want you to leave," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I care about you, more than I ever thought possible." The words hung in the air, heavier than anything he had said before. Lyra's eyes widened for just a moment, and then she looked away, the silver in her gaze clouding over with something like sorrow. She didn't speak immediately, and Ethan feared that maybe his words had pushed her further away, making her realize that staying was too risky, too much of a complication. "I care about you too," Lyra finally said, her voice low. "But that doesn't change what needs to happen. We're not from the same world, Ethan. Our lives are too different, too divided. The more I stay here, the harder it will be for both of us." Her words felt like a punch to the gut. Ethan had known, deep down, that their worlds couldn't merge forever. But hearing it out loud, hearing Lyra say it, as though it was a simple fact of life, it hurt more than he had expected. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The room was filled only with the soft hum of the deactivated device and Ethan's own heartbeat, loud in his ears. He wanted to reach out, to do something, anything, that would stop this from happening. But he knew, somewhere in the back of his mind, that Lyra was right. If she stayed, if she refused to leave, the danger wouldn't just follow her. It would follow both of them. "I don't want to say goodbye," Ethan said finally, the words thick with emotion. "I don't want this to end." Lyra stepped closer to him, and for the first time in a long while, her usual coldness seemed to melt away. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly as it brushed against his. "This isn't the end," she said, her voice strong despite the sadness in her eyes. "What we've had, it means more to me than you realize. You've given me something I never thought I would have. A reason to feel something other than duty." Ethan's throat tightened as he looked at her. "Then why go? Why not stay, and we figure out another way?" Lyra shook her head again, this time more slowly. "Because staying is not the answer, Ethan. If I stay, I risk everything, not just for me, but for you. You don't understand the gravity of what's at stake. My people, they will do anything to make sure I return, to make sure I conform. I can't let them drag you into that." Ethan's eyes flickered with frustration. He wanted to shout, to make her see that they could fight this together, but the reality of the situation hit him hard. There was no fighting against her people. There was no changing what had already been set in motion. He took a deep breath, feeling the air in, his lungs become heavier with each passing moment. He looked at Lyra, really looked at her, the woman who had come from a far-off planet, the woman who had shown him things he never expected to feel. "If this is goodbye," Ethan said, his voice breaking just slightly, "I need you to know something." Lyra met his gaze, her silver eyes still shining in the dim light. "What is it?" "I'll never forget you," Ethan said quietly. "You've changed my life in ways I can't even explain, and I'll always carry what we had, no matter where you go." For a long moment, neither of them moved. It was as though time had stopped, the weight of their parting too heavy to bear. Finally, Lyra stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close in a gesture that felt like both an end and a new beginning. "I'll never forget you either, Ethan," she whispered. "You gave me something I never knew I needed. Thank you." And with that, she pulled away, her eyes meeting his one last time before she turned and walked toward the door. The finality of the moment hung in the air, and as the door clicked shut behind her, Ethan stood there, the ache in his chest growing stronger. But somewhere deep down, he knew that their connection, no matter how brief, no matter how impossible, would always remain.